are times that leaders just need to decide. But when those leaders flex those I'm going to decide muscles without considering other perspectives, the autonomy of their colleagues is shot and their ability to adapt is going to be hurt moving forward.
Leadership lessons from Mayo Clinic, Dr. Richard Winters.
As a doctor, you're constantly in a position to be making life and death decisions.
We can be on autopilot so much, almost like robotic. How do we step out of these blind spots and make just better decisions? My passion is to be a doctor. Where is that passion coming from?
This idea of context shifting radically. You're in the ER, you also could hang in the boardroom with senior execs, and then you could go to a coaching session.
As leaders, we wear various hats. One of the hats we wear is that of a teacher.
I'm curious, you've worked with some amazingly high-level leaders over the course of your career. You obviously are one as well. What have you found to be some of the commonalities among leaders who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time?
Yeah. So I think most leaders become leaders because they are experts. Like they're very good at getting some stuff done. And this is, I'm a physician and I'm an emergency physician and I practice in healthcare and stuff, but I think this is everywhere. For any leader, they're very good at getting stuff done. And then what happens is, I wish this could work better. And then they start attending some meetings or they start figuring out how to change things. And now they're in this space where it's not just their expertise. It's not just me being an emergency physician. All of a sudden I'm meeting with cardiologists and orthopedists, or you're not just kind of the VP of marketing. Now you're meeting with engineers and stuff. And it's being able to make this change from being an expert of something where you really know what to do to the situation where actually there's lots of ways of going about it. There's lots of kind of competing interests. There's lots of disagreement, fears and worries. And then how do you mess through all this sort of stuff and get things going? So the best leaders are able to do that. They're able to adjust to these moments where no one knows what to do. They have an idea of how they want to move together, and they can help the group move through that.
I'm really curious about the fact of your career, because there aren't many like you, where you are a practicing active doctor, an emergency room doctor, but you also then hang out in the boardroom and you coach other leaders to help them be better, all at the same time. How did you create this type of career for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I was born and that was just the way it was going to be. No, I think it's interesting, as a lot of times as I'm working with medical students and residents and stuff, they're asking me, how do I do what you do? And I think for all of us, things are changing all the time. And what we do is we want to follow things that interest us. And then eventually, next year, 5 years later, these things come together in ways that you had not expected it. And there's like these new jobs. And for me, it was kind of very much this way. I was like this kid in high school who was like punk rock, skateboard, high school music and that sort of stuff. And I was like a C- student. And then in college, all of a sudden there were some things that happened, made me decide, maybe I'll be a doctor. Told my parents, hey, I want to be a doctor. They very appropriately laughed, and then went to medical school. And so decided that emergency medicine was right for me. Then started finding some things that weren't working, attending meetings. Somewhere in there got an MBA. Somewhere in there learned about coaching, which I had never heard about before. I always thought it was like either kind of Bobby Knight shouting things from the courtside and telling you what you were doing right or wrong, or individuals like talking about, tell me about your feelings and that sort of stuff. What I found was a way of thinking about how I'm thinking and my effectiveness and how to help others to do that. And so all these sorts of things start coming together in ways that I had never thought, and then ended up coming back to Mayo Clinic. I had initially trained here, practiced in California for 25 years. And these things just come together. I don't know. That's just how it happens.
You mentioned something happened in college that then changed your mind to want to go into to be a physician. What happened?
Yeah, so I was not a good high school student, and honestly didn't feel like I was a good student. And then in college, I had a couple teachers that were very influential for me. And I found that as I was creating my own schedule, and focusing on some things that I wanted in my own way. That was very helpful. And then at the same time, my grandmother got Lou Gehrig's disease, and so she was at home in our house. So we were taking care of her, and I took a job at the hospital working nights as a monitor tech, like looking at ECGs. And just all those sorts of things came together, and I thought, yeah, this is kind of interesting.
Interesting. So would you say you had to find a purpose, find a why, find a reason to want to then go? Because being a doctor is obviously so hard. There's so much that goes into it. There's so much just official schooling, but you needed some sort of stronger purpose or why to say, yeah, I'm willing to sign up for all of that stuff to do it.
Yeah, I think the why is important. And it's interesting. There was an individual who I was talking with yesterday who was like, "Hey, can I talk to you? I'm not sure what I want to do." And right now they're doing a lot of stuff in AI, and they also are thinking about becoming a doctor. And I think the importance there is, geez, I don't know how old I was, 18, 20-year old, do I really know my why yet? Maybe I do. But what I do know is that there are things that are interesting to me, things that like I like learning about, things that about the world that I want to know. And just identifying those things is, I think, so important. And even now, as I'm talking to individuals who are mid-career or even at the end of the career, I think a lot of times we can jump into things that maybe aren't so interesting to us, and we find ourselves trapped in these places that, geez, this isn't really my best life. And so I think finding the things you're interested in, doing those, getting better at them, other things open up. That's how it's worked for me.
How does that work with the find your passion advice that
Yeah.
it was out there? Now there's a lot of criticism of that because, yeah, find your passion as long as they're hiring, right? How do you manage those two things of what you're curious about, what you're interested in, but also you got to make a living?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a personal thing. I agree with that. Like, find your passion. I think it is important to find something that's interesting to you, and I'm not sure if that's your passion, but doing work. And I think that as you're doing work, you identify things that you get good at, and it's interesting the interplay as you get good at things. Sometimes the passion comes from getting good, the
Yep.
passion comes from knowing more. These things kind of work in harmony in some ways. It's hard to set off. It would have been hard for me at the age of 10 to say, "Oh, I want to be a doctor. My passion is to be a doctor." Where is that passion coming from? A lot of times the passion comes from the external world and what I'm seeing others do. It may not be internal. On the other hand, sometimes at those times, the internal things, the drive may not be there, and it takes us doing things, getting good at it, understanding things that starts to create passion. So I think it's kind of messy.
What do you like best about being a doctor?
So the things that attracted me to emergency medicine, for example, it's always learning. There's always things that are going on. I think I like taking care of people across whoever they are, wherever they're at, in whatever situation, in whatever mindset that they have. And for emergency medicine's that way. I mean, we take care of everyone. And I like this concept of, in this gurney, there's this person, and this gurney, there's this other person who completely disagrees with them and may have hurt that person. And this person is someone at the end of life and at the beginning of life. This person's rich, this person's poor. I really like being able to take care of people. And so that, plus just like the logistics of it, I'm not a person who could stand in the OR and do the same procedure over and over every day. That is not for me. That is for my wife. That is like her. But for me, I need to like do different things, and so
You like that you never know what's going to roll into the door.
yeah, I do like that. But it's interesting because as people say that, it's funny as we're working. There's some people who look at the ambulance board to see who's coming in. And for me, I don't really care what's going on in the ambulance board because I'm able to take care of whatever comes in. I don't want to know what's coming in. I want to know what is here. And I can just predict what's going to come in. I know that there's going to be someone with abdominal pain, someone with chest pain, someone who was in a car accident, and I just don't know their names yet. And so even the things that we think are unpredictable tend to fall into these sorts of patterns. There's not much that I see in the emergency department these days that is like, oh, that's a new thing.
I would think seeing trauma every day could like almost make you numb to stuff. I don't know, but it seems like it would. How do you, like, when you leave there, live a normal life and not be numb to all of the traumatic things you see every day?
Yeah. So what pops into my mind is that, I was talking about how I wanted to be a doctor. So I was going to go to medical school. I was a person who was always passing out. Like, in grade school, there's like, or junior high, there's like sex ed, and they're all of a sudden they're showing this uterus, and I'm this kid who fell asleep, like passed out on the floor because that's, and then even in medical school, there were things that I was just passing out during. Somewhere in medical school,
Like, because you couldn't bear to see it, or
I don't know. It was just, it just.
you're not
that's
falling
the way it
asleep. You're
was.
literally passing out. You're saying,
Yeah, like afraid
oh,
of blood or afraid of,
wow,
like really deeply feeling, I think it was what was going on. And then at some point it was a vascular surgery rotation, and I was still concerned that I don't know if I'm going to be able to do some of these things because I'm afraid that I would pass out. And all of a sudden, at that moment, like the surgeon said, come over here to like scrub in. And there was like this switch that went off, which was less of the like this empathetic kind of I don't know, whatever passing out response I had, to more, this is something I know about, and thinking about things in a different way, if that makes sense. And so for me, as I'm taking care of patients, there isn't a dissociation from it. I mean, there's very much an empathy there, but it's alongside this knowledge of what to do and how to respond. And for me, that's how it happens. And in any field, there's burnout. Medicine, there's a lot of burnout. A sign for me of burnout is when I'm not able to have both those worlds be together, and I start to over empathize, or I start to feel things a little bit too deeply in ways that hurt my thinking. I don't know if that answers it, but it's just that trauma for me is a problem that has these decisions, and there's specific things I'm looking for. It's a very different part of my brain. And then we'll take care of the patient. Then I'll go up and talk to the patient, and that's a different mindset. It's really kind of stepping into the individual. And so these two things coexist.
this feeling though that, for example, a family member is on the borderline of dying if you're not there to save them, and their family is out in the waiting room, and it's on you to save their life, or to have this be the worst day in the lives of those people in the waiting room. Do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah,
What,
definitely.
how that being almost a daily thing, or a daily thing, how does that weigh on you?
Again, it's one of these things that is a part of what I do. And so you kind of move in and out of these different mindsets. There's the charting mindset as I'm in front of the computer. There is the writing orders. There is the taking the history mindset. There is the stepping back and making sure that I'm not missing information, talking to the nurses, understanding from the phlebotomist. There is the talking to the patient, the family, dealing with those emotions. It's not dissimilar to anything that anyone is doing in their work. It's just for me, it's a matter of dealing with people and emotions at those sorts of times. But it's a natural thing.
It doesn't feel like it would be natural for a lot of people. It feels like it becomes more like it's become intuitive to you. It's just what I do.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to patients in the waiting room, or family members in the waiting room, when COVID occurred, it was very difficult for many of us because we could not let family members come to the bedside. And so, as an example of, yes, we're taking care of this patient, but we want the family here, but for the patient's safety, for the family's safety, for the safety of everyone else, as COVID started out, that was a very difficult thing. So there are things that happen, at times where you're trying to reconcile these things, where you are certainly experiencing things and wanting to make sure that you're making decisions, helping out in the best way that you can. And you need to figure out ways of processing the emotions that you feel, the tragedies that you're experiencing. And so I think I'm maybe sounding a little bit like it's either this or that, but it's always this parsing of emotions and decisions and what's going on and how can I best help out and what's my efficacy. I mean, all these sorts of things coming together.
I'm also fascinated by, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this idea of context shifting radically. And this is unique to you more so than just about anybody I've spoken to. You're in the ER. You also could hang in the boardroom with senior execs, and then you could go to a coaching session. And so there aren't a lot of people who can wear all of those hats, yet you seem to do it really well with grace and humility. How do you do that?
Yeah. And that's very nice of you to say with grace and forgiving, because I think it starts with, have I slept? Have I been eating well? Am I exercising?
Taking care of yourself.
What's going at home? Am I healthy? Those sorts of things, because if any of those things are off, my ability to handle things with grace is it's difficult. And so, internally, I need to make sure that I'm setting up the best environment for me. But otherwise, all these different domains are based on experience. If I had not been in a boardroom, if I had not been through coaching training and had all the experience I had coaching, if I had not been in multiple meetings where things worked out well and things did not work out well, it's just all of these things kind of coming together. So in many ways, I think externally it seems like they're very different, but to me, it can even go back to what we were talking about with the Cynefin framework. As we're in a complex framework of decision making, there's just a way that it's no longer me being an expert, it's me facilitating. And so whether I'm going to be facilitating in the ED at the patient's bedside and trying to understand family members and healthcare providers what's going on, or whether I'm in a executive committee meeting and people are disagreeing, I know it's like the same sort of vibe, I guess. And same thing as I'm coaching someone, it's this thinking about what is it that they're needing in this moment. And it seems like here there's a complexity issue. It seems like they're not thinking about some of these other perspectives, that they may be even afraid of those perspectives. And how can I help? It flows fairly naturally to me. And the nice thing about this is that it feels like as we learn some of these things, as you learn how to become a leader, as you learn how to apply some of these skills, you start to see how they can help you in different domains. It's gratifying.
Are you mainly coaching doctors?
So healthcare, so it could be, and generally my practice is senior leaders, chairs, administrative leaders, so COOs, CEOs, CMOs, department chairs. That sort of
Group
stuff.
or one-on-one or both?
Yeah, either.
Okay.
And so, that's another part of the thing that I love is that, one-on-one is great, but it's also, just last week, I was in a great healthcare organization in Arkansas. And for 2 days, I had all their leaders come together, and they're all working on very difficult things like how do we improve engagement and decrease burnout? How do we get patients discharged by noon? How do we create a multi-specialty center? So I'd have these different groups working together. And from a facilitative perspective, I can help them come together, kind of face some of the things that they were disagreeing with, figure out then how to work from there and get things done. And so it's any of those sorts of scenarios.
I think excellent leaders, regardless of where they work or what their industry is, there's definitely a coaching element. When I think about my favorite bosses, in fact, they were really good coaches, both long-term developmental for me and like short-term in the moment, do this instead of that, you messed that up, or that was really good, that type of like all of that. What do you think makes a great coach?
Yeah, so I think first of all, the question is, what is a coach? Because, and this is one of these things that you like, for me on the medical literature, I'll be reading and they'll be talking about some coaching thing. I'm like, that's not what a coach does, and mentoring. And there's a lot of kind of confusion there. And so I'll just say from my perspective, what a coach is, I think it's actually easier to go down. I think as leaders, we wear various hats. One of the hats we wear is that of a teacher. And so as a leader, as I'm meeting with colleagues, groups of individuals, there may be things that they need to know that they don't know. And so I can teach them this knowledge about what's going on in the environment, what's going on within the organization, how to do this thing, how to read this financial statement, how to put a central line in, those sorts of things. That's teaching. And so sometimes as a leader, I'm going to be teaching. Then there's mentoring, and as I'm mentoring, I'm helping people see the world from my experienced perspective. I've been there and I've done that. I have subject matter expertise, and for them to come to me, I can help them think through things based on my experience. Based on what you're saying, this is what I would suggest you do. You may want to approach it in this way. That's very much, for me, a mentor. You're helping them see the world through my eyes. When you're coaching, you're helping them see the world through their eyes. And so the tools of coaching are very much active listening, trying to hear for what's being said, what's not being said. And then the use of questions, trying to help them see things, make sense of things, challenge things that they're thinking, and also challenge the actions that they're deciding to do moving forward, and trying to figure out whether that's working or not. And so it's really, from a leader perspective, I think the leader is moving from this kind of expert mentor to coach facilitator. That is the essential thing for our best leaders. And I'm talking about the best leaders. So there are some leaders who can lead very well when nothing's changing. But if you're leading in any situation where things are changing, you're going to need to be able to be a facilitator, a coach in many ways. And then the other hats, like you can be a supervisor, you're saying what's right and wrong for the organization. You're certainly enforcing the values of the organization. And then other hats that we wear is that of sponsor, where we're trying to help people have opportunities. And so I think as a leader, whether I'm in a meeting with lots of people or one-to-one, I may see an opportunity to teach. I may see an opportunity to coach or facilitate, to ask questions, to try to bring things forward, insert a little bit of supervision. It tends to be a fairly dynamic thing. Less and less mentoring, though. Less and less, what is it that I think? It's more
Really?
important what we
Why?
think. I think so. So why? And I think this is very context dependent.
Okay.
Very context dependent. My information needs to be considered as part of it. But to be able to adapt, and how to get into this. There's a guy at Ohio State, Paul Nutt, who wrote these great papers about decision making in corporate settings. And one of the case examples that he used was that of Quaker Oats. They bought Gatorade. Smithberg, who was a CEO, I think it was Paul Smithberg, they bought Gatorade, loved the flavor, is doing well, did very well. It went from, a few hundred millions to billions of dollars. 10 years later, the CEO is like, Snapple. I love Snapple. Look, it tastes great, doing good. Buys Snapple, goes from a couple $1 billion down to a couple $100 million. It just destroyed things. That leader had a lot of expertise. CEO, running Quaker Oats. I mean, a lot of stuff. But there were also a lot of blind spots there. And so if I'm a leader and I'm leading behind my blind spots and I'm telling people what I want, there's kind of this tendency to, okay, the boss sees this, the boss has all this experience. And so that's an example of a decision that was not made well. It was very much based on what the CEO thought, what the leader thought, and they had missed out on lots of huge things. They had missed on the whole distribution process. Things were regional as opposed to national, and so they angered many of the local distributors. There was radio hosts who were sponsors that they alienated. The whole
Stern.
manufacturing practice. Yeah, Howard Stern. Yes, he went from to Snapple to Crapple.
Yep.
The manufacturing process was different. So this is an example. So I want them as a leader to think about what I'm thinking. I'm going to teach them this information, but as much as possible, I also want to step back and allow the facilitation to work. So we're not doing this behind my blind spots, my power, my ability to hire and fire. There are certainly times as a leader I need to make a decision. Certainly times. But as much as possible, as I'm considering this complex space, I want all these different perspectives. I don't necessarily need names set to them, but I want this discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going back through some of the useful tweets that you had in the past, and you said effective leaders seek diverse perspectives, recognize the bias of individual opinion, make decisions methodically. Ineffective leaders make reflexive decisions, which I think shows up here in this decision of the CEO wanting to acquire, I already did this, I'll do it again, and we'll just do the same thing. They amplify the thoughts of a few. They see alternate perspectives as obstacles. So this is this dichotomy between effective leaders and ineffective leaders that you're describing. And this happened with the same person who made, you write about this in your book, which I highly recommend people get, You're the Leader, Now What? That this acquisition of Gatorade versus Snapple, and how the same person had a good acquisition that went well and then had a really bad one. It ended up costing him his job.
Yeah, and I mean, I can go. There are so many examples of this. Things that I've done, it's decisions that I've seen. This is the great thing about being a coach, and if it's like learning from all the things that others have done, and so this is just it's the way we need to step back. It doesn't need to take. You don't need to have a retreat. This can even be something that's 15 minutes where you're just not. This is what I think. You kind of vomit your decision out. Example, at Mayo Clinic, we have leadership dyads and triads. And so for every department chair who's a physician, they're also paired along an administrative leader and a nursing leader. And so as they're making decisions, these three individuals can come together. Hey, this is, as a physician, this is what I'm seeing. I think we should do. What do you think? The nursing person says, yeah, but you want to think about this. The administrator says, yeah, but we haven't thought about that. And so it's just this way that's engineered for individuals to be able to see around each other's blind spots just by practice. That can take a phone call, or for you to sit down and be thinking about, okay, this is what I think. Geez, what might they think? What might be their fears? How might they react? Even that little amount of stuff is going to be better than you just kind of thinking briefly and then reflexively deciding. And again, there are times that leaders just need to decide. But when those leaders flex those I'm going to decide muscles without considering other perspectives, or maybe they ask for perspectives and don't consider them, the problem there is that the autonomy of their colleagues is shot. They're missing out on key things. They're not going to be told things in the future, and their ability to adapt is going to be hurt moving forward.
How do you balance that out? Let's say there was a CEO of a Fortune 100 company, and I like this idea of dyads and triads, and also the fact that that's not a triad of three doctors, right? It's a nurse and an administrator. The administrative person, I guess, could be a doctor, but you have three separate job functions coming together, and you're valuing the perspectives of each person, and then ultimately you do have to make the call. So how do you balance this? Yes, I want your input, but I'm also need to be known as a person who's decisive, who can make the call when it's really hard, when I don't have 100% of all the information that I want. So how do you balance out that?
Yeah, and I think that depends on the situation and the organization. Yeah. And so there are situations where it's the leader who decides. There are places and times where it's the committee that decides, and there's places and times where you have a larger group of individuals who come together and decide. I think that depends on the culture of the organization. But even in those places, and I do this stuff, nationally and internationally, there's places where I'll be talking and everyone will look to the boss to see what to say. That boss still needs to look around their own blind spots. And so we still need to find ways of gathering this information, these kind of differences of opinion, in a way that they can still make the best decision themselves if they're the final decision maker.
I'm curious now from a coaching perspective. I go around and consult and advise companies, and sometimes in group settings, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes large rooms. And in every room you go in, inevitably you're going to find some people who are they're just not about it. They're too smart. They already know everything, or they're above it. Or there's like, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to be trained. I don't feel like it. How do you handle those? And maybe it's an ego thing. I don't know. How do you handle those people who it's just, maybe they're not growth mindset enough, or they don't want to do it? Maybe some would call them problem students. What's your approach to people like that?
Yeah, and I think this happens as you're talking about speaking to a room of individuals, but it also happens as we're leading. As we're making decisions, we make this great decision based on looking around each other's blind spots. We've come up with all these different options, and now we've decided this way forward. It's not dissimilar. There are going to be people who are going to disagree, even if you use the best practice. If you ask everyone, there's still individuals who are going to disagree. And so then what do? You've made this decision. Do you keep focusing on these individuals? Do you focus on the individuals who aren't paying attention? Do you try to change them? I don't think you can change them. I think they need to want to change, and so one of the things I think is we need to focus on those who are aligned and not on the resistance. That's what so I think you want to understand what are the things that they're against. What are the things that are their fears and worries? You want to take that into consideration. But then once you start getting going, you need to focus on those who are behind you and getting things going and getting things moving in the right direction. And I've seen leaders do this where they get emails telling them one by one all the things that they're doing wrong, and then their cognitive, like that's all they're thinking about is how much they've geez, this was a friend and I've hurt their feelings, and I really want to tell them things are right and things are going to be fine. While they're doing that, they're using up all their time and space and energy, and they're not even focusing on the 85% of the people who are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do, but I think that's it. You still want to be listening, but you don't want to be kind of biting the hook and getting hooked by those negative feelings.
Yeah. One of the questions I get frequently, Rick, is that maybe because of the name of my podcast is the Learning Leader Show and it's really growth focused, they say, well, I want to create a learning organization. I want my company to be known for learning and improvement and constantly getting better and learn-it-alls versus know-it-alls. I think Satya Nadella talks about that. What are some ways that senior leaders within companies can build a culture that is a learning organization?
First of all, it's looking at decision-making processes. I think that's one thing. Is it one of these things where the leader's going to tell people what to do? And if that's the case, are they listening to different perspectives? And if they're not, then it's not really a learning organization. I think in healthcare, we use a lot of all staff surveys. And so we'll ask people, do they feel like their voice matters? Do they feel like they have the things that they need to get the job done? Do they feel like organizationally we are aligned with our values? And as we get those scores, we can do something about that. We can see, we're saying we're a learning organization, but are we truly? If we're a learning organization and people don't feel free to speak up, maybe we need to figure out what's going on there. And so I think using that sort of a data, I think, I think the idea is, so we're a learning organization, you want to see that in action. And I think about, that's probably a corporate value, is we're learners. And so you're going to want to see behaviors about that. And so the behaviors are that people are seeking other knowledge. They're bringing things from the inside and the outside. They're seeking other people's opinions. They are sharing those opinions. They're building upon what's being done. And if they're not, then they're not a learning organization.
Yeah. And one of the things you've written about in the past is how to scale coaching within organizations, right? And you're like, not by like hiring coaches or reading books or holding like a, hey, learn to coach in a day seminar, but by this idea of providing your company with ongoing teaching of coaching approaches, practicing with real life challenges, and then creating opportunities for people to reflect and to develop. So if you want to scale any organization, not just within medicine, but any organization when it comes to like, I want to have a company full of coaches where people are regularly coaching and helping others, what are some more things you would do in that group?
Yeah, I think, so again, that goes back to, if we want a company where people are coaching and where people are learning, because I think they're very much in line there. Again, what is coaching? It's helping people see things from their own perspectives. And so as the leader, am I an individual who's having annual reviews with people, and am I telling them, hey, you're out of here and this is the thing you're doing good and this is the thing you're not doing good and we need you to do this? If you're having a conversation and that's what it's about, it's likely not a learning and coaching sort of a scenario. If, on the other hand, you're meeting with individuals and asking, so what's going on? What are you seeing? What are you afraid of? What are the things you need? How would you like to approach this? What would you like to be doing? It's actually doing things based on coaching as opposed to just saying coaching. The culture of an organization is dependent upon not only the things that they say they're going to do, not only the values that they espouse, but also actually those behaviors. It's doing it. That's the culture. And if you're saying you're going to be a coaching organization, a learning organization, But you know what? When times get difficult, that's not how we are. That's inconvenient. Then your culture is sour. It's not reflective of the things that you say that you're doing.
How do you run one-on-one meetings with direct reports?
So it's coaching, honestly. I think that
Yeah.
I like so there are things as you're running a meeting, there's lots of ways of running it. There's like a consent agenda, which is these are all the things you need to know. This is informational. This is the data of how you're doing and et cetera. And so if there's something in there that I need to pull out and I think it's important, I'll pull it out, but I'm not going to spend my time talking about this that much. What I'm going to spend a lot of time understanding is what is it that's working for you? What can I do to help you? What would you like to be doing moving forward? How can the organization best help you? What things might get in your way? And so it's going to be 15, 20% of the data that is organizationally how you're doing and how you fit in and stuff. But then the majority of it's going to be us thinking about how we can help you be the best who you are within this organization.
So it's almost like this Socratic method of asking them questions, having them run that portion of the meeting. But then it's on us as the coaches, as the leaders, to follow through, right? I've had those managers who ask that at times, but then the follow through isn't there, and then it can go completely the opposite direction. So you have to be a follow through machine as well, right? When they actually give you the good answers of this is what we should do, or this is what I think, or this could make this place better. It's as the leader, we have to also be willing, able, and ready to follow through on what they're requesting.
Yeah, and as a leader, it's not like you're asking them like, what should we do as an organization? What should we do as a department? Those decisions are being made, and so we decided we're going to move forward with telemedicine. How do you fit in within that? What are your thoughts moving ahead? If they're like, I don't like telemedicine, I think it's dumb. Well, that's what we're doing. And so how do you see this fitting in with you? We're going to move into this market. Well, I don't think that's a good place. I think we should move into this market. Well, that decision has been made. So given that, how would you like to proceed? How can we work together? Where do you see growth in this for you? So there's still this leadership of what is our strategy and where are we going and how are we going to, kind of win and be successful, and how do you fit into that?
What do you think of Atul Gawande, I think his name, the checklist manifesto? This was about doctors essentially having a basic checklist before surgeries and everything else. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. And I think that falls within, as we're thinking about the decisions, like clear things. Like so I referred to there's a level red trauma, which I go into work tonight. There's going to be a level red trauma. And with a level red trauma, there are these people that need to be there from all these different disciplines. I have to be at this spot of the room. The patient's going to come here. The paramedic's going to say these things. There's very much checklisty things that we're going through. And so that is in an environment where the environment is known. And that works out very well because there are things that are that. And because if we don't do this thing that we have shown decreases the chance of bad things happening, then bad things are more likely to happen. Mm-hmm. You can't use checklists, though, when we're in this complex, ever-evolving, volatile environment. The checklist is something that you get to when you're in this environment where things are quite predictable.
Describe the difference between a time when checklist is good versus a time when it's not.
So within medicine,
Okay.
How do we decrease burnout and increase engagement? There's probably some checklists out there, but do they even fit our group? I was talking to a group. Actually, I was taking a group through this the other day, and it was a group of HR professionals. And for them, they thought the way to decrease burnout and improve engagement were to have people go on walks together and use a calming app. And for them, that was very much working. And so they were wanting to do this organization wide. These are sorts of the checklists, the things that they were going to do. I just envisioned that going to a medic exec and having a bunch of physicians there, and the emergency physician saying, so you want us to walk together? So you want us to use this calming app? That checklist does not work there. And if you go to a group of surgeons or radiologists or whatever, it's going to be very different for all of them. And so there are going to be some things that you can kind of figure out what to do, but the environment is very different for individuals. And I love this kind of concept of, I think it was Stanley McChrystal, who was talking about chessboards within the military and talking about how we like to think that we can strategize like chess, which is if they do this, then we're going to do that. And we're going to move this piece, and then they're going to move that piece. Oftentimes, the decisions that we're talking about are multiple chessboards. They're moving independent of us. We're moving independent of them. And as you're going through your checklist, it just no longer matters. It's not helpful anymore. And so it's recognizing, is this something where we're in this place where it's common sense, where we all agree there are specific steps? Use a checklist. Or maybe the checklist doesn't work anymore. And maybe we're holding on to this traditional checklist, which is actually, hurting us badly, and we need to be thinking about things in new ways.
I'm curious if you were building the ideal room of emergency doctors, what are the things you would look for in a person to be who you could project would be really good at that job? Like, what are the qualities? Obviously, they got to go to med school and do all the basic table stakes stuff. I know that, but I'm just talking about the qualities, the makeup of the type of person that would be good at that job.
Yeah, I mean, and I've certainly been in positions where I've hired and fired before, but the it's just like for anything. I mean, they need to be there in terms of the knowledge. And so you're going to use whatever. And so it's for medical school, and so how have their scores been? They did residency. What were their evaluations? You're going to talk to people and hear about how they do and how they, how knowledgeable they are. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, how well are they going to fit in with a team? How well are they going to work with you? How well are they aligned with these values? Are their goals moving forward and aligned with the organization? And you're gonna be asking questions about this. But I think that, and there's lots of ways of approaching this at Mayo. The way things work is that you get hired, but you're kind of on this. You're not yet a full. We're hired as a senior associate consultant. You don't become a consultant until 3 years in, and then that's a vote by your department. And so there was a metaphor where, geez, I want to create an Olympic swimming team, and I don't remember where this came from. So there's this new coach putting together this Olympic swimming team. So what do? Do they put people in a room and ask them how fast they swim? Okay, they do. Oh, I swim really fast. Great, you're on the team. Or do they wait and see how fast they swim and how fast, how well they take direction and move forward? You need kind of probably a combination of those things. And so there's probably the interviewing, but then after they come into the organization, how well are you orienting them to the organization? How are you developing them and aligning with values? And then are you still making a decision whether they're the right person or not?
So in that analogy, if you realize, oh man, they're not a very fast swimmer, are you able just to get rid of them, or like, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and certainly it should not be a surprise to anyone.
Yeah.
There needs to be steps along the way of how you're doing. And for us, there are specific numbers of publications you need. There's ways you need to fit in with practice, clinical practice. There's education things. There's with the nurses, the physicians who are working with you, how they feel. And so all these things come together. You don't want to start at year 0 and then at year 3, this is how you've done. You want to have multiple points of contact along the way to help individuals.
I think that's an interesting way to make hiring decisions and firing as well as promotions. Is you have to. My dad would always tell me that when I was trying to make decisions of who to hire for manager roles, when they were going from individual contributor to manager, he's like, you got to find a way to get them in the job, like to have them do the actual job of the thing. So if you can simulate it as best you can, put them in a little probationary period of actually doing the role, they may actually realize they don't want to do that job too. That's another thing that happens. And so it's like, in a way, I think we all could probably get better at trying to put people in the actual pool swimming laps, as opposed to just listening and them tell you that they're fast swimmers.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And also, as you were saying, the recognition that it needs to really be good for both sides.
Right.
As we hire someone, we tend to think about from the organizational perspective. But if this person's in the wrong job for them, it's really best for us together to decide that, we should probably maybe move on and find a better place for each of us.
Yeah. I'm curious, Rick, what's next for you? You've built this amazing career. You're still in the prime of it. What's next for you?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably more of the same.
You going to write more books?
That's a good question. Perhaps. perhaps.
What would
Yeah,
you write your next one about? I mean, the last one, by the way, is called, again, you are the leader now, what leadership lessons from Mayo Clinic. What would the next one be focused on, you think?
and so that book, it touched on one-to-one stuff, but it
Hmm.
really is focusing on how to lead teams. And
Hmm.
I think the next book would be really more from a coaching on a one-to-one perspective, and how we can help each other, how we can help ourselves, yourself as a leader, kind of process the things that we need to do. I think that's it. How to be most effective as in these one-to-one conversations.
How does writing help you from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, it's definitely a learning thing, and it's not something that I think that's work. First of all, it's deciding to do that and then doing it, and then going through and getting ideas out, playing with those ideas. For me, a lot of the anxiety that I had while writing was, geez, am I going to get this right? I'm building a lot of these ideas based on the ideas of others, and I didn't want to do disservice to those ideas. And so that in itself was learning about, first of all, myself and the concern about what other people are thinking and whether I'm serving their ideas well, but then also getting more in depth into those ideas and to better understand them so they can make sure that I'm really doing a good job. Writing is very much a learning exercise, very much.
Doesn't it create, personally, I have to sense this from you too. It feels like, as you already said, it's a learning exercise. It creates such clarity of thought to get the thoughts out of your head onto the page because you don't fully know what you think about something until you try to teach it to somebody else. And writing is a great form of teaching. And so, to me, I think leaders should have some sort of a writing practice, if anything else, even if they don't share the writing, but to do it for themselves to clarify their thinking.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me that was helpful there was not just writing what I thought, but also having the experiences to draw from it. And
Yes.
so to trial some of these things out, to see how they're working, what's not working. And so I'm writing on paper, but I'm also editing in real life to try to identify what's working and what's not working. And I think it created something better for it.
And you being an active practitioner of this stuff in real time as a doctor, as a coach in the boardrooms, that adds so much credibility to the ideas because they're literally being brought to life every day.
Yeah, and really the book is a lot about dumb things that I've done. like that's where for me where the points of learning and like how to improve. And I think for all of us as leaders, this acknowledgement that we're going to make decisions and do things that we aren't, geez, I would have approached this differently and learning new ways from it. The things I do offer me a lot of learning opportunities.
In the military, they have these after action reviews after missions. I've spoken to a lot of fighter pilots, generals, right? McChrystal, you mentioned, have had them on a few times, and they're really good about their after action reviews, the debriefs, the check your rank at the door, go in there and just let's talk about it. What about in the medical profession after an emergency comes in or at the end of the day? I'm wondering, like, what's your after action review process?
Yeah, and so that's changed. And so it used to be, so when I was in training, we'd have M&Ms, morbidity and mortality, and you did not want to be called to go to M&M because it would be talking about a case where where a patient had a bad outcome, whether they died or whether they were injured based on the care. And the way that was done was it was okay, everyone, let's tell Winters all the things he's done wrong and how he should have approached it in this way. And so it was a very anxiety provoking. And the way you learned was to hear about all the bad things that you had done. And for someone and other people in the room, you're thinking, geez, I'm glad it wasn't me because I could have easily has done that. Not a good learning environment, and an environment where actually you don't want to be found out. And so now what happens is we do things, we get rid of the names, we have people review the charts so they can't necessarily tell who it was that was involved. They go through and we're looking not only for the specific actions of the physician or the nurse or whoever was involved in the care, but also stepping back and looking at the process as a whole. Oftentimes what happens is mistakes are made because individuals are put in positions where resources that are needed are not there, the support is not there, and that gets in the way. Or perhaps where there were so many things going on that it would be hard for anyone to deal with that. And so it's very much more of this kind of learning environment. It's looking at the system issues. It's looking at the individual issues. And a good M&M now or quality sort of analysis these days is going to look at all these different causes. And then there's going to be some homework on process things to improve and much better.
That's good to hear. That is. I think we also can learn from all of the successful, the great outcomes, not just the ones that go bad. We learn from success and failure. Rick, one more question before we go. I feel like you just have this overall life knowledge in addition to building an amazing career and living it out as we speak. So I'm curious to ask, if you're meeting with somebody a bit earlier in their career and they say, Dr. Winters, I don't necessarily know what I want to do yet because I just graduated undergrad, but I do want to leave a dent in the world. I want to make a difference. I want to be a positive contributor to the world. What are some general pieces of life/career advice you'd give to that person?
Yeah, and I think number one, I'm not going to be a mentor there. Meaning I'm not going to say, hey, geez, if I were you, I'd go to this college. And if this is your interest, you should take this major. And after you do this major, then hook up with these people. That's just, I feel like, and at that time, and individuals are going to listen to me, to you, and they're going to it's a blueprint for their life. And I feel like I can do a lot of harm in that sort of an environment. I feel like I want to coach. And so what I want to do is to help them understand, what is it that's interesting about this to you? So what is it you're thinking about doing? How can you better kind of understand what your options are? Who might you reach out to hear different things? And so that's one thing. And I think another thing is to understand that, I guess this would be maybe the mentoring thing or the teaching thing, which is that, as we talked about earlier, there's the job that you're going to have tomorrow is likely not even available today. And so if you're looking at what the jobs are today and you're trying to prepare for it, it's not where you should be going. It may not be you. And so going back to identifying those things that are of interest to you, where you want to put the work in, doing it, and then moving on to the next thing. But along the way, I think seeking multiple different perspectives is a helpful thing. Again, from that individual, this is in a complex space. You don't want to just listen to the father or the mother or the uncle or this person that was very influential. You want to get multiple different ideas and figure out how to move forward. That's in a way that's best for you.
Super helpful. If you want more, I think the book is called You're the Leader, Now What? Leadership Lessons from Mayo Clinic. Dr. Richard Winters. Man, it's awesome to have you here on a Learning Leader Show. I would love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Ryan.
And big thank you to Ed Batista for connecting us, another great coach. He told me, you're going to love talking to Rick, and he was absolutely right. So big thank you to Ed. And again, Rick, thanks again. Talk with you soon, man.